right, 1380 WPHM. You've heard of human trafficking. Our next guest has really taken a very close look at it. In fact, a deep dive, if you will. His book is called In Human Trafficking. It's a legal thriller. It's fiction, but it's based on an awful lot of truth. Mike Papantonio is a lawyer who tests cases and is one of the top legal minds, if you will. And his book is called In Human Trafficking. He's on the line with us right now. Mike, good morning.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thanks. You're a test attorney. What does that mean? I mean, that means literally you're testing cases.
For example, when the opioid case, we initiated the opioid case in the United States, and we try what they call the bellwether test cases to see what are the outside possibilities of what's a jury going to do with this if it goes to trial. So we try the very first cases that typically are tried in that type of litigation, whether it's a pharmaceutical case or, as a matter of fact, the tobacco case that was launched right here in Pensacola, oddly enough, some of the biggest cases in the country. And so what we're hired to do is to first of all to do the discovery in the case, find out who did what and who did what wrong and who are the sociopaths and who are the good guys, and then we go to trial with those facts. So that's basically the best description I can give you. But it's just an entire law firm of trial lawyers that try these test cases.
So help us understand where human trafficking fits into this and what we might see coming down the line in terms of legal cases against human trafficking.
Yeah, we tried the first national case up in Ohio. As a matter of fact, if you look at the news today, there was, I think it was 161 folks arrested for the trafficking cases that are going on up that way. But we tried, we filed that case to bring some national attention to how bad this is. I think everybody believes, Paul, that this is just one-off cases, that you have some pimp who hires women and, some untoward business takes place. It's far from that. What you have is now you have corporate America involved in it. They're financing some of the biggest trafficking problems in the country. Those are the folks that, to a large degree, are financing the porn industry that leads directly into the kind of trafficking that is just it's a pandemic plague on this country right now. And so I think most people aren't aware of that, Paul. I think what people think is that this is just some seedy little side deal that some character, he has one or two girls that work for him. I mean, we're involved with a case that you have the trucking industry that's trucking girls from the East Coast, originating in places like L.A., trucking them across Interstate 10 throughout the United States, stopping at truck stops all along the way with girls that are 14 and 15 years old and telling folks, come by and have sex and leave. Now that's organized. You see, that's not right. What everybody thinks. They see a show like Taken, and they say, well, okay, this is how all this is. But the surprise is that you've got corporate America involved in a big part. The big hotels, they understand what's going on when they bring these, young girls into hotel for 2 weeks, and they bring in camera equipment and lights, and they have the suite that's been rented for 2 weeks. They know what's going on, and these hotel chains are involved. As I say, you've got financing coming from some of the, directly from Wall Street to make some of this happen. So
shocking and sickening. But why don't we hear more missing person cases then? I mean, why don't we talk more about this? Why don't we hear more about it?
Well, it's disjointed. First of all, corporate media is dead, Paul, where it comes to really telling stories. They don't. Matter of fact, I've done corporate media, MSNBC, Fox News for years and years. I did it, and I found out that they can't move into telling stories that the advertisers in this situation, if they tell the whole story, it goes all the way to some of their advertisers, some of the hotel chains, some of the people who are financing this stuff. So corporate media has become incapable of really reporting the news on stories like this. The same way that they did on opioids. The reason the opioid disaster took place is because they wouldn't talk about the distributors who were distributing this stuff illegally. So we got a kind of a multiple problem. You've got regulators who are completely dysfunctional. I mean, where it comes to the Department of Justice actually doing their job, they've been terrible at doing what they need to do. State regulators, forget it. and so you got regulators out of there, they're not doing their job. You've got the media that is just almost abysmal failure where it comes to reporting stories like this. And so this book, my hope is that this book, somebody will read it and they'll better understand what it is that's going on. I've written several books similar to this, as you may or may not know, and it's covered the cases that we've handled. But my thought about this book is to have them sit down at a beach or, the privacy of their home and read a good thriller and come away and say, I learned something. And because if a story's reported, maybe it has a shelf life of 24 hours, but it takes more to tell the whole story here. You've got to tell the whole story in a way that people understand it.
So we're far from having solved the issue of human trafficking. Do you think it is something that we can solve in this country, or at least curb it to the point where it's not so out of control?
Well, I think you can, but I think you got to take the money out of it. I mean, it's a $42 billion a year business. And what happens, Paul, is you've got people running it that that's running that industry that they have a commodity they can use again and again. This isn't like selling cocaine where you sell it and it's gone. You've got these girls that you're taking them from truck stop to truck stop, whatever you're doing with it, putting them in a hotel room and filming pornography, whatever you're doing, it's reusable. It's a reusable commodity. Most of these kids that come into it last about 7 years is the average. They end up dying from a whole host of problems after that. They typically die of drug overdose or suicide or diseases of all kinds. So it's a really ugly story, and even as I'm telling it, it's probably you're going, oh my God, I don't want to hear that. But the truth is, we have to tell the story. Somebody's got to know how bad this is, and the United States is, the L.A. and New York, East and West Coast, they've just become, just like the home base for what's going on here, and then it spreads throughout Middle America.
It's a page-turner. It's a legal thriller in human trafficking, the book by our guest, Mike Papantonio, along with Alan Russell. Really awful stuff, but when you get into it and you start to learn more about it, it becomes pretty engaging, pretty engrossing, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it does. I think you have to, I have to do it because we file the cases, and then every day it's easy to write these stories because you come away from the courtroom and you've, something else has happened and you've learned some new fact that nobody's paying attention to. And that's the kind of thing that's put into these stories, they're backstories. The elements of that book, even though, the murders did not occur and some of that material didn't happen, the basic story did occur and is occurring even as we speak, Paul.
Read all about it in Human Trafficking. Mike, real pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.